The world had turned to smoke and thunder. The wagon was gone, the horses scattered, and the air still reeked of gunpowder and fear. Clara Weston lay half-conscious in the red Arizona dust, her wrists raw from the rope that bound them. She could hear the wind scraping through the canyon, but beneath it came another sound. Hooves, steady and sure, drawing nearer. When she lifted her head, the sun burned her eyes. Silhouettes appeared, tall riders draped in leather and feathers, faces painted in black and crimson streaks. Apache. Every nightmare story she'd ever heard came rushing back. The raids, the captives, the vengeance for white men's betrayal. Clara tried to crawl backward, but a shadow fell across her, and before she could scream, a hand gripped her arm. He was different from the others. His presence seemed to quiet even the wind. His horse, a black stallion, snorted and pawed at the ground while he studied her with eyes the color of storm clouds over the desert. There was no cruelty in his gaze, only something unreadable deep as the mountains behind him. The man barked an order in Apache, and two warriors dismounted, seizing Clara roughly. She fought, kicking, twisting, but her strength was no match for theirs. "Please," she gasped, "don't—" A sharp command stopped them. The leader raised his hand, and instantly the men stepped back. He looked down at her, then spoke in broken English. "You alone?" Clara's breath trembled. "My father." The wagon train. She stopped when she saw the flicker of understanding in his eyes, and the bitterness that followed. He turned to his men and said something in his native tongue. Laughter rippled through the group, though it wasn't kind. Then he looked back at her and said flatly, "You come, now." They lifted her onto a horse, his horse, and tied her hands to the saddle horn. She felt the heat of his body behind her as he mounted. When the stallion started forward, Clara's heart pounded so violently she thought she might faint. The world blurred around her, the jagged rocks, the shadows of circling hawks, the fading trail of smoke where her father's wagon once stood. Everything she knew was gone. Hours passed. The sun burned low, staining the sky orange. The Apache band rode in silence, save for the occasional whisper in their language. Clara's throat was parched. Her wrists bled beneath the ropes. Still, she held her chin high. If she was going to die, she would die proud. At last, they stopped by a stream winding through a narrow canyon. The warriors dismounted to water their horses. The leader, her captor, cut her down and gestured toward the stream. "Drink," she hesitated, his dark eyes narrowed. "Drink," he repeated, softer this time. Clara knelt and scooped handfuls of cool water to her lips. Her reflection wavered in the ripples. Dust-streaked face, wild hair, eyes bright with stubborn fire. When she looked up again, he was still watching her. "What's your name?" she asked suddenly, surprising even herself. He didn't answer right away. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Taza." "Taza," she echoed, tasting the strange sound on her tongue. "Why did you take me?" For a heartbeat, something flickered behind his eyes. Grief, maybe, or anger. "Because," he said quietly, "your people took something first." The words struck her like a slap. She wanted to ask what he meant, but he turned away, signaling his men to move. By dusk, the land turned red and shadowed. The Apache camp appeared like ghosts among the cliffs, smoke curling from small fires, children's laughter mingling with the bark of dogs. When they entered, conversation stopped. Every eye followed her. Taza dismounted, pulled her down from the horse, and handed her to an elderly woman. "Keep her," he said. "She is not to die." As the elder led her toward a corner of the camp, Clara looked over her shoulder. Taza stood near the fire, his face half hidden in the flicker of flames. He had spared her life, but for what reason she could not tell. All she knew was that her fate now lay in the hands of a man whose gaze could burn as fiercely as the desert sun itself. And deep down, beneath the fear, something unspoken began to stir. Night in the Apache camp was alive with sound. The distant howl of a coyote, the low hum of voices, the rhythmic beat of drums echoing through the canyon walls. Smoke from the fires curled upward into the star-filled sky, carrying with it the scent of roasting meat and wild sage. Clara Weston sat near one of those fires, her wrists still bound, her mind whirling with confusion and dread. The elder woman who had taken charge of her was named Nalan, a face lined with time, eyes sharp with understanding. She had offered Clara a blanket and a clay bowl of stew, thick with corn and rabbit. "Eat," Nalan had said simply, motioning to her mouth. Clara had shaken her head at first, refusing. She wasn't hungry. She was terrified, but her stomach betrayed her with a growl and the woman's expression softened. "No poison," Nalin said in slow English. "Food, you live." Clara stared at the bowl for a long moment before finally bringing a spoonful to her lips. The warmth spread through her, and for the first time since the ambush she realized how cold she was. Across the camp, Taza stood with several warriors, speaking in low tones. His face was partly hidden by the firelight, the shadows of the flames dancing across his cheekbones. Every so often his eyes flicked toward her, quick, assessing, unreadable. She didn't know what he saw when he looked at her. To him she was probably a symbol of everything he despised, an intruder, a reminder of loss. But to her he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. The same man who'd burned her home and taken her prisoner had also given her water and warmth. Later, as the camp quieted, 2 young Apache girls brought her a cup of water and a strip of hide to bind her wrists more gently. They didn't speak, but their eyes held curiosity rather than hatred. Clara gave a small nod of thanks, and for a fleeting moment she saw their fear dissolve into shy smiles. Then, the air shifted. A group of warriors approached, their faces hard with anger. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a hawk feather in his hair, spoke sharply to Taza, his tone accusing. He pointed toward Clara, then to the cliffs where the battle had taken place. Clara couldn't understand their words, but she didn't need to. She saw the rage in their eyes, the way they looked at her like something foul that had tainted their home. One warrior stepped closer, his hand gripping a knife. "Taza!" he barked. Taza turned slowly, his gaze, calm but lethal, locked with the man's. A single command burst from his lips, sharp and final. The knife wielder froze. Silence spread across the camp like wind over dry grass. Then, with visible reluctance, the man backed down, snarling under his breath. Taza moved to stand between Clara and the others. His presence filled the space like a shield. "No one touches her," he said, in English this time. His tone was low, the kind that made men obey without question. The warriors hesitated, exchanging dark glances, but they turned away at last. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. When the camp settled again, Taza crouched beside her. The firelight painted gold in his eyes. "They hate you," he said evenly. "You are enemy. They lost brothers, fathers." Clara swallowed hard. "And what about you?" she whispered. "Do you hate me too?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I hate what your people did." His voice softened, rough with emotion. "But hate is easy. You are not easy." The words left her breathless. Before she could speak, Nalin appeared, speaking gently in Apache. Taza nodded once, then rose. "You stay here," he said to Clara. "You will live." She wanted to ask him why. Why spare her? Why stand between her and his own warriors? But he was already walking away, his broad shoulders fading into the shadows of the canyon. Clara sat in silence, her pulse still racing. Around her, the camp returned to its quiet rhythm. Drums low, embers glowing, the soft murmurs of families settling for the night. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself and looked toward the darkness where Taza had gone. She didn't know what fate awaited her, but something told her death wasn't the plan anymore. And though fear still gripped her, a dangerous thought began to take root. If Taza had spared her life, perhaps he wanted something far more complicated than revenge. By the 3rd day in the Apache camp, Clara Weston had stopped shaking every time someone passed near her. She had learned the rhythm of their life. The sound of grinding stones at dawn, the smell of smoke and roasted corn, the way children ran barefoot through the dust without fear. But she could still feel the walls around her, invisible and cold. Everywhere she went, eyes followed her. The women whispered. The men stared. Even the children, curious and bold, kept their distance. To them she was a stranger from a crueler world, one that had stolen their lands and blood. Taza, the war chief, was seldom near. When he was, the air seemed to thicken. He moved through his people like a shadow, calm, powerful, unspoken authority trailing behind him. Clara could not tell whether he avoided her or watched her silently when she wasn't looking. That morning, Nalin, the elder, brought her food again. Corn cakes and a slice of venison. "Eat," she said in her usual tone. Clara obeyed, but when she glanced across the fire, she saw Taza approaching with another warrior, Kolo, the one who had nearly attacked her before. Kolo's face was hard, his expression one of open disgust. He said something in Apache that made Nylan frown and turn away. Then he pointed at Clara and spat at the ground. The meaning was clear enough. Clara straightened her back. "If you've something to say," she said coolly, "say it where I can hear." Taza's dark eyes flicked toward her, surprise flashing there. The warriors nearby murmured. Kolo smirked, clearly enjoying her boldness. "She speaks," he said mockingly in English, the words broken but understandable. "Maybe she wants to fight." Clara met his stare. "I don't fight cowards." The laughter that followed was sharp and dangerous. Taza's expression hardened. In a heartbeat he was between them, his hand gripping Kolo's chest, shoving him back. "No," Taza said, his voice low but thunderous in its command. "Enough." Kolo's jaw clenched. He said something fast and angry, gesturing wildly toward Clara. The tension in the camp thickened until even the air seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Taza let go of him and said something that made the warrior's face darken further. Kolo stalked away, muttering curses under his breath. The others dispersed, though their eyes still burned with judgment. Clara's pulse raced, but she refused to look away from Taza. "You didn't have to protect me," she said quietly. His gaze lingered on her face. "Yes," he replied. "I did." There was something in his tone, something that didn't belong to duty or pride. It unsettled her. Later that day, as the sun dipped low, she wandered a few steps from the camp under the watchful eye of one of the guards. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, the first in many weeks. She found herself standing at the edge of a stream, staring at her reflection. Her hair was tangled, her dress torn, her face smudged with dirt, and yet she hardly recognized herself. The frightened rancher's daughter was gone. Behind her came a voice. "You are brave," Taza said. She turned to see him standing there, his bow slung across his back, his expression unreadable. "Brave?" she repeated bitterly. "I spoke to defend myself." "That's not bravery, it's survival." He stepped closer. Many women would cry. "You do not." "I did," she admitted softly, but only when no one was looking. Something shifted between them, like the desert wind changing direction. He studied her face as though seeing her for the first time. "Why do you keep me alive, Taza?" she asked. "You say your people hate mine. You have reason to hate me too. So why?" He hesitated. "Because killing you will not bring back my brother." Her breath caught. "Your brother?" "White soldiers killed him near your father's land," he said quietly. "They took his life, his horse, his pride. I take you to remind them of what they did." Clara swallowed hard, the weight of his pain cutting through her. "And yet, you stopped Kolo from killing me." His jaw tightened. "Revenge is easy. Honor is not." For a long moment they stood in silence, the wind swirling around them, the storm brewing in the distance. Clara felt something inside her shift, a strange pull between fear, sorrow, and a longing she could not name. As thunder rolled over the cliffs, she said softly, "Maybe we both lost something we can't get back." Taza's eyes flickered with something that almost looked like understanding. "Maybe," he said. Then he turned, leaving her alone by the stream as the first drops of rain began to fall. And for the first time since her capture, Clara no longer wished to run. The camp was restless. Tensions ran high after Kolo's challenge and the whispered talk of revenge among the warriors. Clara Weston had sensed the growing danger for days, but nothing could have prepared her for the announcement that spread like wildfire. Taza was being challenged to a duel, one that would decide her fate. If he lost, she would die. The morning was heavy with heat and the sun poured over the red cliffs like molten gold. The Apache gathered in a wide circle on the canyon floor, their faces painted with streaks of black and red. Children were pushed to the edges. Women held their breath behind woven blankets. Clara was brought to the center, tied to a stake, a ceremonial symbol of the trial. Her pulse thudded violently in her ears. She scanned the crowd looking for any flicker of kindness, any hint of mercy. Her gaze landed on Taza. He was calm, but the calm of a man who knew the knife could cut either way. His eyes found hers and something unspoken passed between them. Fear, yes, but also defiance. "You will fight," a warrior bellowed, pointing a blade at him. Taza nodded. No words were exchanged. The rules of their honor dictated silence and steel. The challenger stepped forward, his shadow long on the dust. Clara swallowed hard. She wanted to scream, to fight, to plead. But she also realized something deeper. If Taza lost, she would not survive. She had grown to understand him in the few days she'd been captive. And now that understanding came with an impossible fear. She did not want to die without feeling what life, or perhaps love, had offered. Her throat tight. She whispered a confession to the wind, trembling. "If you're going to kill me, kiss me first." The words startled even her, but when she looked at Taza, she saw recognition in his eyes, a flicker of surprise and then a fire she could not name. He stepped closer, lifting her chin gently. The camp's chatter dimmed as the wind seemed to carry her words directly to his soul. His dark, stormy eyes locked on hers, holding a question without speaking it. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Time slowed, the drums of the duel fading into silence, the sun hanging motionless in the sky, the world narrowing to the space between them. Taza's hands were warm, rough, and steady as he cupped her face. His lips met hers, soft at first, then with a fierce intensity that stole the air from her lungs. The kiss was everything she hadn't dared to imagine. Shocking, tender, terrifying, and yet impossible to resist. She felt his heartbeat strong and sure against her own. The camp seemed to vanish. Only Taza and she existed, two souls caught in a moment of defiance and surrender. The world outside, the duel, the anger, the threat of death mattered nothing. For the first time, Clara felt the strange, dangerous pull of a connection she couldn't name, couldn't control. Then the moment broke. Taza stepped back, his hand lingering near hers. The challenger, impatient, circled, and the duel began. The sound of clashing weapons cut through the quiet. Dust rose in clouds around them. Clara held her breath as Taza moved with precision, skill, and a quiet fury. Every strike he made was deliberate, controlled, a dance of honor and survival. Minutes felt like hours. The challenger lunged one final time, but Taza sidestepped and delivered a blow that sent him sprawling into the dust. Silence fell over the circle. Taza stood victorious, his chest heaving, his dark eyes finally finding Clara's. The ropes that bound her wrists felt lighter now, though no one moved to untie her yet. She knew her fate was no longer in question. He had won. She had lived. But more than that, the kiss they had shared in the shadow of death had changed the rules entirely. Clara lowered her gaze, feeling warmth flood her chest where fear had lived. She had survived, yes, but she also knew something dangerous had begun. A bond with the man who could kill her and had chosen, instead, to save her. Taza approached, his shadow stretching over her like protection and promise. "You live," he said softly, almost reverently. "Because I chose it, not them. Not the stars, Her heart beat wildly and she could only nod, unable to speak. Words seemed too weak to contain what she felt. In the fading sunlight of the Arizona canyon, Clara Weston realized the truth. Death had almost claimed her, but in its shadow, a spark of life and desire had been lit, and nothing would ever be the same. The duel had ended, but the air was still heavy with tension. Taza returned to the center of the camp, chest heaving, shoulders stiff with exertion. Clara's heart still raced, not from fear alone, but from the memory of his lips and the quiet, unspoken connection that had formed between them. She could feel it lingering in the dust between them, in the way the camp's shadows seemed to bend around his presence. But peace was fleeting. One of Taza's men had been injured during the scuffle with the challenger, and Taza himself bore a shallow cut along his shoulder, blood streaking through the dust on his skin. Though minor, it spoke of the dangers they lived with. Every choice carried consequences, every moment was survival. Clara had been taught to tend wounds on the ranch, though never anything like this. Her hands shook as she approached him, kneeling beside the fire. "Let me," she whispered, holding a clean strip of cloth she had found in her pack. Taza studied her silently. There was no mockery in his eyes, no disdain, only a cautious wariness, as if he weren't sure whether to trust her kindness. Still, he allowed her to move closer, lifting his arm to expose the cut. The blood was darker than she expected, vivid in the firelight. She dabbed it gently with water, murmuring reassurances in English. "It's not deep. You'll be fine." His lips twitched, almost a smile. "You are brave," he said softly. "Not like others," Clara froze. "I'm just trying not to let you die." "You should not have to do this," he murmured, but he did not pull away. His gaze softened, studying her face as though memorizing it. The distance between them, built over fear, mistrust, and days of tense silence, shrunk in that moment. As she pressed the cloth to his shoulder, her hand brushed against his skin. A shock went through her, a spark she couldn't ignore. Taza flinched, but not from pain, from awareness. Their eyes met, and for the first time neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. "I owe you my life," she said quietly. "You do not owe me," he replied. "Life is not yours to owe. It is taken. And given." The fire crackled, flames reflecting in his storm-dark eyes. Clara could see scars beneath the surface, old wounds, pain that never fully healed. "Your brother," she said softly, remembering his confession from days ago. "You still carry it?" "Yes," he admitted, the single word heavy with grief. "Every day. He was my shadow, my blood." Clara's hand paused over his shoulder. "And yet you spared me." He looked away for a moment, jaw tight. "Because to kill you would be easy. To protect you is not." The word struck her harder than any blow could have. Clara had always thought survival was a matter of strength, of fighting and running and enduring. But this choice Taza had made was different. It was mercy and defiance and courage wrapped into one. For a long moment they remained there, firelight dancing across their faces, breaths mingling in the desert air. Clara finished dressing the wound and Taza finally lowered his arm, but he didn't move away. "You trust me," she said softly. His eyes flickered, revealing a depth she couldn't name. "I do not trust easily," he said. "But you are no threat, perhaps a danger of another kind." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. She wanted to ask him what he meant, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she nodded, letting silence speak between them. As night fell, the camp quieted. The fires burned low, and the children slept beneath woven blankets. Clara found herself lingering near Taza, watching him as he surveyed his people, his expression unreadable. The cut on his shoulder was minor, but it had brought them closer in a way neither expected. That night, as Clara lay on a blanket offered by Nalin, she couldn't stop thinking about the man who could have killed her in an instant, and had chosen instead to let her live. His vulnerability, his trust, and the firelight that had caught in his eyes formed a bond she knew she could never forget. She realized something dangerous, terrifying, and exhilarating at once. The wound that bound him to life and to her had also bound her heart to him. The desert sun rose like fire over the canyon cliffs, and with it came the sound of distant hooves, sharp, urgent, unmistakable. Clara Weston had barely stirred from her blanket when Nalin approached, her face grave. "Riders," she said softly. "Soldiers of the white man. They come for you." And them, Clara's heart dropped. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of Apache life, to the quiet authority of Taza, to the fragile sense of safety in the camp. But the threat of cavalry meant death, confusion, and a choice she was not ready to make. By the time she reached the camp's edge, Taza and his warriors had already mounted. The men were tense, ready to flee, while the women and children scrambled to hide among the cliffs. Clara's stomach knotted. She had no idea where safety lay or if it even existed. Taza's eyes found hers, storm-dark and commanding. He gestured toward a narrow canyon path that cut into the mountains. "Ride," he ordered. "Fast now," she hesitated. The path was treacherous, narrow, lined with rocks and sudden drops. But before she could protest, Taza grabbed her arm. "No hesitation," he said, voice low, steady, and impossible to disobey. They rode side by side, the stallion's hooves pounding against the dust, the canyon walls echoing the rhythm of their flight. Clara's pulse raced, but she clung to him, trusting his skill in a way she had not trusted anyone in her life. The wind whipped her hair across her face, but she did not wipe it away. Her focus was on survival and on him. Hours passed, and the cavalry's shouts grew distant. Still, the desert stretched endlessly around them, barren, sun-scorched, and dangerous. Clara finally dared to speak. Why did you save me before? Why do all this now?" Taza's gaze remained forward, scanning the horizon. "You are part of this now," he said simply. "Your life. It matters." Clara's stomach twisted. The notion that her life could matter to a man like Taza, an Apache warrior whose people had suffered at the hands of hers, was impossible. And yet here he was riding beside her, risking everything for her safety. Suddenly, a cavalry scout appeared on a ridge above them, rifle raised. Clara instinctively ducked, but Taza didn't flinch. With a quick movement, he guided her horse into a narrow crevice in the rock, shielding her from sight. Two of his warriors flanked her, cutting off visibility from above. The tension in the air was suffocating. Clara's breath came in shallow gasps. Her eyes met Taza's, and he gave her a brief nod, almost imperceptible but full of reassurance. In that moment, Clara realized she would follow him anywhere, through desert, canyon, and danger, because he had become her tether to life, her anchor in chaos. The ride continued until dusk. When the group finally reached a secluded desert valley where the land leveled and sparse vegetation provided cover, the canyon walls rose high, guarding them from the soldiers who might still be pursuing. They dismounted, and Taza helped Clara down gently. She looked at him, grateful, exhausted, and afraid all at once. "Why did you ride back into danger?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He met her gaze squarely. "Because you are not meant to die," he said. "Because some debts, some promises, are stronger than fear." Clara's heart ached with an emotion she could not name. Relief, yes, but also something deeper, something dangerous. Trust. And perhaps even love. Nalin approached, smiling faintly. "You chose well," she said, her eyes on Clara. "You could have run. You could have fled with your people. But you stayed. That is courage, child. That is life." Clara looked at Taza, standing tall among his people, his eyes dark and unreadable in the desert twilight. She had chosen him without realizing it. Chosen life. Chosen danger. Chosen the bond that had been forged through fire, fear, and defiance. As night fell over the desert, Clara Weston understood something vital. Escape was not just about fleeing soldiers. It was about choosing whom to trust, whom to follow, and who could hold her heart through the storm. And in the stillness of the desert, with the stars stretching endlessly above, she knew she had made her choice. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a vast expanse of sun-baked rock, thorned shrubs, and whispering wind. Clara Weston had never felt so small and exposed, and yet for the first time since her capture, she felt alive in a way she hadn't known. Taza rode beside her, his black stallion moving with the surety of a creature born to these lands. Every step, every turn, every shadowed canyon was mapped in his memory, and she followed, trusting him with a faith that terrified her. The days blurred together. The sun scorched their skin during the day, and the nights brought cold that seeped through their thin clothing. Water was scarce, food scarcer, yet they moved forward relentlessly, avoiding trails, scouts, and patrols. Clara learned quickly how to read the desert, the smell of creosote after rain, the sound of shifting sand, the way the light shifted on the rocks as the sun climbed and fell. Taza did not speak often. He rode in silence, his dark eyes scanning the horizon, his jaw tight with focus, but occasionally, when Clara stumbled or lagged behind, he would place a steady hand on her shoulder. That touch, brief as it was, grounded her. She realized she had come to rely on it, as much as she relied on her own wits and instinct to survive. One evening, as the sun sank behind a ridge and painted the sky in fiery reds and purples, they made camp in a small hidden oasis. A trickle of water bubbled from a spring, and a few scraggly trees offered shade. The air smelled of wet earth and desert flowers, and for the first time in days, Clara felt her muscles relax. Taza approached the spring, dismounting with ease. He knelt and cupped water in his hands, offering some to Clara. She knelt beside him, their faces inches apart, and drank the cool liquid. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them, the water and the quiet rustling of the desert. "You saved me," Clara said softly, her voice breaking the silence. More than once, Taza's eyes met hers, dark and unreadable. "You did not run," he said. "Many would have left. You stayed. That is unusual." "I stayed," she replied, "because I could not leave you." The words shocked her, though they had been simmering inside her for days. She had not meant to confess, yet the desert's quiet demanded honesty, demanded that she face the truth. Taza's jaw tightened. He looked away for a moment, then back. "Danger is not over," he said, his tone heavy with warning. "The soldiers will follow. Others may too. You should not speak like that. It is not safe." "I am not afraid of danger," Clara said, her voice steady despite the heat in her chest. "I am afraid of losing what I have found." The tension in his gaze softened slightly, and for the first time he allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile. "And what is it that you have found?" he asked, her lips parted unsure. How could she describe this strange mixture of fear and trust, longing and respect that had grown between them? Words seemed inadequate. Instead, she leaned closer, and for a heartbeat, they simply shared the quiet intimacy of proximity, the sound of each other's breath, the warmth of their bodies against the desert chill, the unspoken understanding that had grown in the days of flight. Night fell fully, stars spilling across the sky like silver dust. Clara and Taza sat near the fire, its glow dancing across their faces. He was wounded in spirit, carrying grief and anger that she could not undo. Yet here, in the sanctuary of the desert, he allowed himself to simply be, and she allowed herself to be near him without fear. When the fire dimmed, Clara curled beneath the blanket Nalin had given her, and Taza remained close, a sentinel in the dark. She realized that she had crossed a line she could never return from. She no longer feared him as an enemy. She no longer wished to escape him. Instead, her heart had become a tether to him, bound in ways she did not yet fully understand. And as the night stretched over the desert, with the hush of the oasis around them, Clara Weston understood something dangerous and beautiful. Survival was no longer enough. She wanted him, and perhaps she realized he wanted her too. The peace of the desert sanctuary did not last. Rumors traveled faster than the wind across the canyon, and one morning a group of riders appeared on the ridge above the oasis. Clara's heart sank as she recognized the banners and weapons of her father's men. They had tracked her, not for rescue but to reclaim what they believed was theirs. When Taza saw them, his expression darkened. The Apache warriors tensed, hands on bows and rifles, ready for a fight that might spill blood on both sides. Clara was torn between relief and dread. She longed for the familiarity of her father's protection, but feared what his men might do to the Apache who had saved her life. Her father rode forward, eyes blazing with a mixture of fear, anger, and disbelief. He saw Clara and shouted across the canyon, demanding she return with him. But it was not just words behind him. Armed men had rifles aimed at the Apache camp. "Clara," he called, "get on your horse and come with me now." She turned to Taza, whose jaw was clenched and eyes storm dark. "You must leave," she urged, her voice trembling. "They will not understand. They might kill you." Taza's gaze met hers, a storm of emotion reflected in those storm-dark eyes. "I am not leaving you," he said simply, and in his voice there was a finality that shocked her. "You belong here with me, not with them." Her father's face twisted with fury. "Do you hear me, girl? Obey your father." Clara shook her head. "I cannot," she said, her voice breaking. "He saved me. He protected me when no one else would. He is the only one I trust." The cavalry shifted uneasily, sensing the intensity of the moment. Taza dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible but steady. He approached Clara, keeping his posture non-threatening but commanding at the same time. "They will not harm you if I say nothing," he said to her, low and steady. "But I will not beg for what is mine to protect." Her father's rage flared. "He is a savage. You are my daughter. I am no longer yours to command," Clara snapped. The words shocked even herself. Her heart pounded not from fear, but from the fire of independence she had never known she possessed. She was no longer the frightened girl captured by bandits and at the mercy of her family's will. She had seen death, lived through it, and chosen life, not theirs but her own. The tension reached its peak. The cavalry raised rifles ready to fire, but Clara stepped forward, placing herself between Taza and her father's men. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice ringing with authority she didn't know she possessed. "You do not understand him, and you will not harm him." For a moment silence fell. Even the wind seemed to pause. Taza looked at her, awe flickering in his storm-dark eyes, and Clara realized she had grown into a force he trusted, and perhaps admired. Her father faltered, confusion and fear flickering across his face. Finally he lowered his hand. "You are making a grave mistake," he said, voice tight with anger and sorrow. Clara shook her head, looking at Taza. "No mistake," she said. "I choose him. I choose this life with him." Taza stepped closer, wrapping a protective arm around her. The Apache warriors moved with him, forming a shield against her father's men. Clara's heart raced as she realized the truth of the bond they shared. one forged in danger, fire, and defiance. Her father turned his horse and, muttering curses, led the soldiers back up the canyon. Clara felt a surge of relief and fear, knowing the reprieve was temporary. But for now she was free. Her choice had been made, her loyalty declared. As the sun sank behind the cliffs, Taza lowered his head to hers. Their lips met briefly, a silent promise of protection and unity. The kiss was no longer a spark of defiance, it was a vow. Clara Westren realized something vital. The world could try to claim her, to bind her with rules and bloodlines, but the bond she shared with Taza was unbreakable. Even in the shadow of betrayal, she had chosen him and he had chosen her. Months had passed since Clara Westren declared her choice to stay with Taza. The desert had become both refuge and classroom. She had learned to ride with the strength and precision of the Apache warriors, to move silently through canyons, to recognize tracks, and to anticipate danger long before it arrived. The desert no longer frightened her. It had become a place where survival and understanding intertwined. Yet the world outside the canyons never forgot her. Letters from home arrived on rare travelers' paths filled with pleadings, warnings, and the heavy hand of expectation. Her father insisted she return, claiming her duty to the family, to the ranch, to her people. But Clara could not forget Taza, nor the man who had saved her life, defended her honor, and in the quiet spaces of the desert, taught her courage. She wrestled with her longing. On the one hand was her heritage, the family she had known, the life expected of her. On the other was a man whose heart and land she had come to love, a man whose eyes held storms and silence, danger and tenderness, all at once. She felt torn between worlds, each demanding loyalty, each threatening to pull her away from the other. One evening, Clara sat atop a ridge overlooking the canyon. The sun bled gold and crimson across the horizon, shadows stretching long over the rocks. Taza joined her silently, carrying 2 water skins and offering one. She took it gratefully and they sat together, the silence between them comfortable, almost sacred. "You think of your world," Taza said quietly, not as a question but as a statement. His eyes tracked the canyon's curves, yet he seemed aware of her thoughts. "I do," she admitted. "Every day, I hear their voices, their warnings, their anger, and I feel torn." He studied her, his expression unreadable. "And yet you remain here." "Yes," she whispered. "Because I cannot imagine a life without you. But the world I left, my family, my people, they will not understand." Taza nodded slowly. "You are caught between 2 fires, one of blood, one of choice, neither easy to bear." She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes I wish the choice were simpler." He brushed her hair back with a rough, gentle hand. "There is no simple path in life, only the path we make step by step." Clara realized then that her life had become one of constant negotiation between 2 worlds, one she was born into and one she had chosen. And though the path was treacherous, she felt the courage growing inside her. Every day spent with Taza, every shared danger, every moment of trust, had bound her heart to his in ways that were irreversible. As darkness fell, they returned to the camp, the soft glow of firelight guiding them. Children laughed in the shadows. Warriors cleaned their weapons and tended to horses. Clara felt both out of place and fully at home. She was a bridge between 2 worlds, the world she had been born into, with its rules and expectations, and the world she had chosen, fierce and untamed, bound to Taza. That night, as Clara lay beneath the stars, she knew that the choice she had made was not without consequence. Her family would never forgive her. Settlers would whisper of her betrayal. Yet the love and trust she had found with Taza, and the sense of belonging she had earned among his people, were worth every sacrifice. In the quiet of the desert night, Clara Westren realized that life between 2 worlds was not a curse, it was a chance to live fiercely, love deeply, and forge a future she had chosen herself. And when Taza knelt beside her, offering his hand and a gentle smile, she took it without hesitation. The 2 worlds might always exist in tension, but together, they had created a place where survival, trust, and love could coexist, where 2 hearts could finally belong to each other. The desert had become their sanctuary, yet it was not a world immune to conflict. Word of Clara's choice had spread beyond the canyon walls. Her family's ranchers, soldiers, and even neighboring tribes had taken notice. Tensions threatened to ignite, and the fragile peace Taza had built for his people was at risk. Clara and Taza rode along the ridgeline one morning, scouting for any signs of approaching danger. The wind carried a mix of dust and sage whipping through her hair. She had grown strong, sure-footed and fearless in ways she had never imagined, but her heart still raced whenever danger loomed. Taza dismounted suddenly, eyes scanning the horizon. "They are coming," he said, voice low, tense. Clara recognized the glint of rifles far below the cliffs. Soldiers, her people, had tracked them to the canyon. She felt a pang of fear but also resolve. "We can't fight them all," she said quietly. "There are too many." He shook his head. "We do not fight for hate. We fight for protection, for life, for what cannot be taken." Clara realized then that he was not speaking of territory alone. He was speaking of her. She felt the weight of that truth pressing on her chest. If Taza lost, her life, their bond, everything they had fought for would be destroyed. The soldiers approached the canyon floor, their rifles raised, their voices shouting demands for Clara's return. Taza signaled for the Apache warriors to hold their positions, forming a protective barrier between the soldiers and the camp. The standoff stretched tense and silent, a powder keg ready to explode. Clara's heart pounded, and instinctively she stepped forward. "Wait!" she shouted, her voice echoing across the canyon. The soldiers froze, uncertain of her intentions. "I am here willingly. I choose to be with him." Her words hung in the air like a spark. The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. Some lowered their rifles, confused by the courage and defiance of the young woman they had expected to rescue by force. Taza moved closer to Clara, his presence a shield and promise. "You see?" he said quietly. "Even words can save lives where steel cannot." Then, in a moment that stunned everyone, he leaned down and kissed her. It was not just a kiss of love, but a kiss of defiance, of protection, of unity. The soldiers' eyes widened. They saw the bond, the respect, the unshakable choice Clara had made. In that instant, violence lost its momentum. The moment of potential war became a testament to connection, courage, and understanding. The soldiers hesitated, then slowly began retreating, recognizing that the bond between Clara and Taza was unbreakable, that they would not take her by force without sparking a conflict they could not win. The Apache warriors relaxed, tension dissolving as the threat passed. Clara stepped back, heart still racing, looking into Taza's eyes. "You saved them," she whispered. He shook his head, brushing dust from his clothing. "We saved each other," he said. Night fell over the desert as the fires burned low. The stars shimmered like silver scattered across the sky, reflecting in their eyes. Clara knew the world beyond the canyon would never fully accept her choice, but it did not matter. Here, with Taza, they had forged a bond that could not be broken. The kiss that had saved a war had done more than prevent bloodshed. It had solidified trust, loyalty, and love. The ties that would carry them forward into a future neither could have imagined alone. Clara Weston understood, finally and fully, that the wild desert, the danger, the choices, and the defiance had brought her to the one life she had truly wanted, a life with Taza, the storm-dark-eyed Apache warrior who had claimed her heart, her courage, and her trust. And as they sat together beneath the endless sky, hands intertwined, Clara whispered softly, "If death comes again, I would still choose this life. With you." Taza kissed her forehead, the firelight dancing across his features, and for the first time they let themselves simply exist, together, unafraid, and victorious in the desert they called home.